Good morning, guys. How are you today? It's cold, right? So today we are going to discuss some of the CSR and the CSR theory. So here are today's agenda. First over, definition of corporate social responsibility. And then second, what are some relevant theory? And then I know that you guys already have some of the assigned readings, right? Have you had a chance to read it? That's so good. And then finally, based on the discussion we have for definition of CSR and then some relevant theory, how we are going to apply those theory in our practice, right? Day-to-day tactics or like some strategy. But before we dive into today's topic, let me introduce myself a little bit. And then some of the examples that I'm going to use is based on my experience during these times. So I used to intern at PETA 2007, like no long time ago. And then I used to work as an assistant campaigner targeting different Asia countries like Hong Kong, Singapore, China, Korea. So it was fun years. And then based on my experience as an assistant campaigner, I worked at Korea University Business School, manager of PR and director of international relations. And now I'm currently an assistant professor at VCU. So I know you guys read that reading, so let's start with the definition. So based on your experience with like as a consumer, and based on the reading you had, how would you define CSR? Corporate social responsibility. Your name?
Mark.
Mark, go ahead.
Like CSR is kind of like what companies need to do to like get back to the community. It's like divide with like the region they're in. Like they're if they like follow corporate social responsibility, they're like giving back, like maybe doing like community service with the like local population and
So like an effort,
giving
yeah.
back, like
Yeah.
maybe donating or doing
Yes.
community service in the, like to give back to the public.
So like effort corporation try to giving back to like a community and society. Okay, that's a good point. And then what else? Your name?
Carter.
Carter. Okay, go ahead.
Wouldn't it also be like the companies like putting pollution into the lake or water? Would it be like kind of like corporate responsibility not to do that?
Like environment issue, right? Okay.
Wouldn't that be kind of like it too?
Yeah, that can be some of like examples from corporate social responsibility. And then who else? Maybe from here, this side? Just, some like a example based on your understanding or like a definition. How would you define corporate social responsibility as a communicator who are going to, discuss, communicate this topic with the public, right? How would you define that? Go ahead.
For the company to be like transparent with their consumers.
Okay.
Like if they promise them like 50% off this deal, like to actually go through with that.
Okay, like a transparent business and practice they are doing. So let me give you like two different kinds of example. One is it's basically from academic literature, and then one is from business, and then the other is from public relations. So read through this definition, and then can you tell some like a difference in terms of perspective they define corporate social responsibility? So like category one, the upper one is from business literature, and the below one is from public relations. What are some like approach, like a difference in the approach in terms of defining corporate social responsibility? Carter, right?
Yes.
Huh.
The first one, wouldn't that be more towards like a business's standpoint? And the
Yes.
second one would be like consumer or like just regular like persons?
So it's like more about function of CSR. And the below one is more about relational perspective as an entity in society. And then they try to define their role as a part of society. Can you see that, right? And then these are the examples from like how industry define their corporate social responsibility. And it actually included some functional role, but at the same time, commonly, they also discuss some of the relational perspective. How we gonna meet our stakeholders' demand and needs, and then how we think about other entity in our society, right? So that's from like a public relations point of view. Makes sense, right? And here is some of like a history of corporate social responsibility, how CSR has developed over time. So business at the beginning thought of some of like legal obligations, adhere to legal obligation. That was minimum responsibility. And then they start to think about like ethical consideration, like being transparent in their business, and then equal employment, like those things. And then CSR, the concept of CSR actually started from like 1980s. And then back then, some people thought that it was kind of a radical idea. Because what is a kind of like a core business principles based on your understanding? Core business principle, generating more profit. And then some people thought that it kind of goes against the core business value. And the business is already busy with just making more money and then following their core business value, right? But like since 90s, like 2000, they started to think about corporate social responsibility, and then it became some kind of like a common sense, like a normal in business practice. And then they also think that it got some advantage, competitive advantage in marketplace as well. So corporate social responsibility these days is become normal. And then the reason why CSR become normal is, before we go with that, we can just think about some of like example in your daily, like some like daily lives. Can you think of any like a CSR example, like a specific example you were able to see? So beyond defining CSR, what were some examples you were able to see in your daily lives as a consumers, or like an audience, or like a viewer, or mark, right?
Maybe when, like at the grocery store, when like you round up like $2 to like donate to like a charity.
Oh,
or something
yes,
like that.
yes. So certain portion of a profit goes to an organization, non-profit organization. That's good. And then what else?
I was going to say, I guess I kind of do the same thing when I go to Panda Express. They always ask me if I want to donate an extra dollar. So I guess that would be kind of like social responsibility too.
Yes, social responsibility. And then that's what we see in our daily lives every day. And then that's based on the stakeholder theory. We expect our organization, corporation, to be responsible about their business. So here, stakeholder means someone who are relevant to organization and then directly affect organization success and then effective by the organizational success as well. So like let's think about the example of Texas Tech University. So not only for the corporation, stakeholders exist for every different type of organization. So who can be our stakeholder for Texas Tech University? Oh, go ahead. Students? Alumni? Faculty, and then staff, and then some of the community members, right? Those are the stakeholders. And then stakeholder, they do have a certain expectation toward the different type of organizations. And then we actually need to meet their expectation. And then at the same time, they also have some right to know about organizations' practice. And then we also need to communicate our practice very well. So corporate social responsibility is based on this stakeholder theory because the stakeholder want organization to conduct a certain degree of responsibility, right? And then expanding the concept of a stakeholder, not only for the someone that directly relevant to our organization, general public, also can be our potential stakeholders, right? So this is just some of like word cloud. People were talking about corporate social responsibility on social media during the last month. And then what words actually stand out to you? These are like some general discussion about corporate social responsibility on social media. Like people are talking about corporate social responsibility on social media during the last month? What words stand out to you?
I would say local communities.
Local community, yes, because corporate social responsibility, part of it, it's contributing the development of a local community. Good. And then what else? Go ahead.
Sustainable development.
Sustainable development, right? And then what else? Social impact they make, right? So like based on this discussion, can you sense some of the public opinion? Do you feel like publics are more likely to feel like a positive or negative about corporate social responsibility? Positive or negative?
I feel like most of the time it's negative.
Mostly about what?
I feel like most of the time it's negative.
Negative? You think it's negative? And then what else? Why do you think that it's negative?
I feel like when it comes to social responsibility, companies are always like trying to defend themselves against something they've done wrong.
Oh yes, that's part of can be like a crisis or risk communication. But based on this word cloud, do you think it's positive or negative? Positive, yeah, mostly it's positive. So, right? Public discourse and public sentiment about the corporate social responsibility is positive, which means they have actually certain expectation related to corporate social responsibility, right? So that is actually based on the theory of expectation confirmation theory. So individual, public have like a certain expectation about organization. And then once that expectation is met, they actually give continuous support for organizations. And because people want corporate social responsibility from various different types of corporations, company actually conduct this type of CXR activity. So stakeholder theory and expectation confirmation theory. And doing the corporate social responsibility, we need to think about some of like a strategy we can do in terms of doing CSR. So there are 3 different types of corporate social responsibility. First, it's a really simple form, donating money, corporate philanthropy, right? And then second, it can be sponsorship. You can see a lot of examples of sponsorship from like a sports game, World Cup, Olympic. And then local community, there are a lot of events about mental health awareness, autism, and then those events can be sponsored by business. And then they actually donate certain money and then promote their company's name, right? And then third, cause-related marketing. So certain portion of profit actually goes to nonprofit organization. And in terms of a form of corporate social responsibility, this is the most complicated form of partnership between corporation and cause and nonprofit organization. So there are a lot of things you need to consider in terms of doing cause-related marketing, right? So let me show you 2 different types of corporate social responsibility example. So while you watch these, I want you to think about it in terms of 3 perspectives. So first, what form of corporate social responsibility are these examples? And then second, are there like you think bad or good CSR? And then third, if you think it is a good, what are some reasons? And if you think it's a bad, what are some reasons, right? So let me share 2 examples.
Some things that I imagine are what my life will be like when I grow up. What kind of person will I be?
He's so unique. Oh my goodness, TJ. He loves art, he loves sports, he loves just life, And he's a very good big brother. But I want him to feel proud of himself for how far he's come. Last year, our dryer went out. We didn't really have the extra money to get a new dryer. And sometimes, if the clothes were too damp, we would have to send them to school in something that didn't get washed yet. It was very stressful.
When the teacher isn't around, they say, there's something nasty on your shirt. he did start laughing.
I know that I have students that think, would I rather stay home today than to walk into a classroom and wonder if people are whispering about me. Anything as a school that we can do to eliminate those barriers, we're of course going to do that. The Care Counts program installs washers and dryers in schools to improve attendance by giving kids access to clean clothes. If your washer or dryer breaks down or you don't have one, you can come up here, volunteer, and do your laundry.
It's just such a great resource and it alleviates so many issues that might otherwise prevent a kid from coming to school. And they're more confident and they're not worried about how dirty they are or anything like that, and they can just focus on being a kid.
Now that our community knows that we have this, everyone is starting to be involved with our school. You can volunteer while you're waiting on your laundry. You're out and you're communicating with other parents, the teachers, the students. Seeing that change is just amazing. It's just another way to improve that connection with families and with a greater community. We're all a team, the school and his family are going to work together to give him everything that he needs.
I feel powerful when somebody cheers for me, like somebody tells me that I can do things, and when I believe in myself.
The first example, and a second.
For my mom, for every big bucket of boiled or original recipe, KFC makes a 50-cent contribution to Susan G. Komen for the cure. Together, we could make the largest donation in Komen history to help end breast cancer forever.
So what do you think? So, okay, go ahead.
The first one, obviously it was longer, but they
A little
also
longer,
brought
okay.
out facts. So like when you were seeing it, it said 95% of the students are coming back to school.
Okay.
So I think it was like more effective and more positive in that manner. And also, you know, it had that emotional tie to it as well. So, yeah.
So definitely the first one was better
Yes.
in terms of CSR communication.
Yes.
And then what makes you think that the second is worse?
I don't think it was necessarily bad. I
Okay.
think that it was just too short to really get
okay.
that emotion across. So maybe if they actually brought in like more examples, and even like with the KFC buckets, if everyone that was holding it was like, you know, a breast cancer fighter or something like that.
Okay.
Just more emotion appeal.
Okay, good point. And go ahead.
I feel like the KFC one was more like an informational.
Informational?
It was more like informational.
Okay.
Instead of really trying to get like emotion out of you. Because they're like already donating towards a cause.
Okay.
I feel like they were kind of expecting you to have that type of emotion already.
Okay.
So I feel like the first one was better because it's more in depth.
Okay.
But the second one's still good too.
Okay, second one is still good too. So between like two, first one is better mostly. And what about the issue they support? So like a dry and washer company, and then donating their washer and dryer to schools and for children who are in need, right? Do you think it was kind of like a good philanthropic effort? Okay, then how about the second one? Why? Like so?
With the first one, you had a lot of people interacting with the washer and dryer, so people
Yes.
were more, I mean, yes, they were both benefiting the school and the kids, but then with the parents seeing that that's the machine that they are using at the school, they're more likely to get that product. With KFC donating, they're just targeting people who already go to KFC.
Okay.
Or breast cancer
Okay.
clinics, of course, but I don't normally go to KFC, and I feel like they could have contributed more, so was it 50%?
Okay.
56? So I feel like I don't know, a bucket of chicken and 50 cents.
Okay.
They could donate it more.
So like you guys feel some of like a feeling like off from the like a second collaboration between KFC and Susan G. Komen. So let us look into the further about that campaign. Oh yes. So KFC sells fried chicken, right? And then once they sell a bucket of fried chicken, the certain portion of profit goes to Susan G. Komen. And then they support breast cancer research. And then fried chicken, and then health organization. Do you think it go well? Like in terms of like a value they pursue, and then like, so here what we need to actually think about, and then we think that it's kind of, that partnership is off, is a fit, congruency between organization's core mission, value, business, and cause, it's nonprofit organization. And then once they have like a really good fit, it actually contributes to the success of CSR communication, CXR activity. And it is closely related to the success of a CSR, and then including the fit factors you need to also consider is how the company can benefit from the CSR activity. So from the corporation point of view, even though we are trying to contribute to society and then be helpful for our society as an entity, we also need to think about what benefit we can get. Is it like more like a profit perspective from the cause-related marketing happening KFC and Susan G. Komen? Or is it something like reputation management? We want to enhance pro-social image, those benefits we can get from CSR activity. And then finally, the most important thing is based on stakeholder theory. Are we meeting our stakeholders' demand and need and the public opinion, right? Or we follow those things. And when we decide our CSR strategy and the details, the evaluation is actually dependent based on legitimacy theory. So what is legitimacy? Like an easy word.
Like how really the product is or services, I guess.
Oh yes, is it really like a deemed, like a necessary by the public? The organization is whether it is them deemed necessary or not, right? So when people decide about legitimacy toward the organization, there are three different type of standard criteria. One is pragmatic. So whether company is producing actual benefit to our public and audiences, right? They are generating good product, good services, meet our public. And then second is moral legitimacy. So it's like a different level. Are they are doing good thing or not? What they are doing is appropriate or not? And then they are actually contribute to social good or not? So it's a different level. And then finally, it's cognitive. So once pragmatic and the moral legitimacy are met, people are think that the cognitive legitimacy is enough, sufficient. So corporation doesn't need to make further justification to convince cognitive legitimacy. So based on your evaluation for the example that I shared about CSR, which legitimacy you are based on when you decide this CSR is good or not? You think?
For the first one?
Both. Example, both. Is it more based on pragmatic legitimacy or moral legitimacy? Or cognitive legitimacy?
I feel like for me the first one was moral, just because they were.
For CSR examples, right?
The first one was more moral. The second one felt more cognitive, I feel like.
Oh yes, that does make sense. But when we look into CSR, we actually make a decision based on, more likely based on moral legitimacy, right? And then the reason we look into moral legitimacy is because we are trying to look at those companies' core value and mission, just beyond just generating more profit. So your evaluation toward the CSR activity is mostly based on moral legitimacy, right? So here are some reasons we actually have to define our company's core mission and value just beyond generating like more profit. And then, we should remember that we are a communicator. On behalf of the organization, we are going to communicate this company's value. And a lot of companies actually missing this part, like defining their core mission and value, just, beyond making more profit. So these two readings or articles are actually talking about the importance of defining corporation's core value and the ultimate purpose as a corporations, and the importance of communicating those values with your stakeholders and public. So I encourage you to check these two readings after this class. I'm going to share this reading with your instructor. So please do so. And then based on our definitions and then based on some strategy we just discussed in terms of CSR, here are some like a key point we need to communicate. And then we need to include in our communication about corporate social responsibility. First, what you are specifically giving. What specific tangible things or intangible things you are trying to giving. That can be the first one. And second, what impact, what result, what change you are trying to bring through this CSR activity. And then third, what are your motives? Are you trying to serve your own organization's benefit, or are you trying to serve your public goods and then try to contribute to society? So those information you need to give. And then in terms of tone, the people are more likely to have their attitude toward the message based on tone. So between promotional tone, like a self-promotional tone versus factual tone, giving all the relevant CSR information to your public, do you think which one would work better? For CSR, in terms of people feel more like authenticity, sincerity about CSR, do you think which one would more like work better for public?
Motives, CSR motives.
In terms of tone, but between two tones, promotional versus factual tone. Like a promotional, self-promotion about CSR activity, and factual tone, giving all the relevant information about CSR. Go ahead.
I think
Factual tone, yeah, works better. So there are a lot of research testing whether which one works better in terms of tone. And the people thought that factual tone is so much persuasive and convincing in terms of evaluating companies' authenticity and the sincerity about their CSR activity. So those are the things you actually need to consider in terms of CSR communication. And then one of the theory you actually look into from the reading was framing, right? That's actually mass communication theory. And then what is the framing, guys? What is the framing?
It's been a while since they learned about that one.
Okay. But like what is the framing? How would you use framing in your day-to-day practice as a communicator? Like what is framing? Yeah, start from there.
Having people see things how you want them to see them, having them perceive the information that you give them in a certain way.
Oh yes, that's a good way to put it. From a communicator perspective, you are trying to emphasize a certain point that you want people to perceive, right? So framing is actually one of the communication strategies you can use in your day-to-day practice, not only for CSR activity, but others as well. So here is one example that I did in my campaign experience with PETA. So PETA has been doing this boycotting the wool from Australia and New Zealand because their business involving a lot of animal abuse cases, for especially producing the wool in Australia and New Zealand. So one way I did like a public awareness campaign about the inhumane practice of this industry. And then the other, we actually try to work with these fashion companies, like located in like Hong Kong, Singapore, China, and Korea. So we actually send out this email to this over like 300 or 400 fashion companies to CEO, and then asking for joining our campaign, and then not buying wools from Australia and New Zealand. So we were able to hear back from them maybe like 2 or 3 responses. So whenever we hear that responses, we did some of like a media release. So here are some media release I did in Australia media. And the one way that I framed this story was how this company is being ethical by meeting the stakeholders' demand, consumers' demand about ethical business behavior, right? And the second way is economic point of view. Some economic loss. The Australia and New Zealand wool industry will get impacted by this boycotting, right? So you can actually emphasize different aspects of the story. And then it actually helps increase the possibility of media coverage and publicity. So that can be one way you can actually use for frame. And then it applies to your CSR as well. You can actually emphasize the story of your contribution to make to entire society. And then the other way, you can also show how you can actually meet your stakeholders' needs and demand. So all these different aspects of a story you can make and then increase your publicity and then media coverage. So that's the way you can actually use framing theory into your communication practice. So let's think about goal of CSR communication in terms of 2 perspectives. First, the public actually can pay attention to the issue your company is trying to work for. And then second, you can actually give some impact, some positive reputation about your campaign. So think about 2 perspectives, right? So I know that our reading kind of define whether CSR communication is reactive or proactive, right? But based on our discussion today, do you think a CSR communication is reactive or proactive? Go ahead.
I think it can be either, but it's typically proactive.
Okay.
Because if you already have good standing with your consumers or just the public in general,
yes,
then if something were to happen, like if it's a restaurant and someone gets food poisoning, like, people have a better understanding that it was an accident and not something done out of malice.
Yes, good. And then who else? Reactive, proactive. Go ahead.
I was just going to agree with her. I feel like it's normally always proactive.
Oh, yes.
Instead of reactive.
Yes. So like proactive means you are constantly monitoring stakeholders' demand, public opinion about certain issue. And then you actually try to advance or meet their needs. But reactive is more about recovery, rebuilding, right? So good CSR communication is supposed to be proactive, unlike our readings definition, right? So here is another way of being responsible from organization point of view. Have you guys heard of corporate social advocacy? Yeah, not yet. Corporate social advocacy. Not yet, it's something new. So like a corporate social advocacy, it can be in line with the same context of corporate social responsibility, but the difference is corporate try to stand one side for specifically controversial social issues. So corporations speak up about the gun violence issue and then take a stance, maybe like a gun regulation, gun right. And then companies speak about same-sex marriages and then take a certain stance. So they are trying to be more vocal about these controversial social issues, unlike corporate social responsibility. So it can be controversial. The company actually can get some backlash from taking certain point of view, but still they are doing that because based on the public opinion, public expectation. So a lot of public want corporation to be responsible and then to solve these controversial social issues. And then especially Gen Z, they want the corporation to be responsible and then to be an actor to solve controversial social issues. So today's takeaway, good corporate social responsibility communication is based on proactive strategic communication practice, not reactive. If it is good. Okay. This is for today. Any questions? No? Good.
Thank you.
Good. Good.